All right, folks, let me know if any of this sounds familiar. I barely eat anything and I still can't lose weight. Everything that used to work and doesn't work so well anymore. I swear I can look at a cookie and gain 5 pounds. And then comes the conclusion I've heard hundreds or maybe even thousands of times at this point from men and women over 50, maybe my metabolism is broken. And you know what? I understand why people believe that. Because when you're eating less than you used to, exercising more than you used to potentially, and you're trying harder than you used to, and the damn scale still won't budge, it sure as heck feels broken, right? But what if it's not? What if your metabolism is actually doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing? That your body isn't failing you? What if it's been adapting to the signals you've been sending it for the last 10, 20, maybe even 30 years? Because there's a huge difference between a body that's broken and a body that's adapted. Broken sounds permanent. Adapted means something entirely different. Adapted means we can give it new signals. And if you're someone who spent years dieting, eating less, doing more cardio, losing muscle, gaining the weight back, and then starting the whole miserable process over again, this episode may completely change the way you think about your metabolism. But more importantly, it may change the way you think about your body. Because your body isn't stupid. It's not stubborn. It's certainly not your enemy. It's listening. And the question is, what have you been telling it? So, welcome to chapter 4 of my upcoming book, Fully Alive, a blueprint for building the strongest, healthiest, and most meaningful second half of your life. This chapter is titled, Is My Metabolism Broken? All right, folks, so whip up your protein smoothies and let's jump into it. Congratulations, you've just found the #1 over 50 health and wellness podcast on the planet. Hello and welcome to the Over 50 Health and Wellness Show. I'm your host, Kevin English. I'm a healthy aging expert and the founder of The Silver Edge, and I am on a mission to help men and women over 50 build the health, the strength, the confidence to make the second half of life the best half. All right, folks, here we go. Chapter 4, Is My Metabolism Broken? If I had $1 for every time someone told me their metabolism was broken, I could probably buy a beach house, maybe in Tahiti. Seriously though, after years of coaching men and women over 50, I've heard it hundreds of times, maybe thousands. Kevin, my metabolism is broken. I barely eat anything and I can't lose weight. Everything I used to do stopped working. My body just doesn't respond anymore. If you've ever thought or said any of those things, I want you to know something. You're not crazy. You're not imagining things, and you're definitely not alone. In fact, one of the reasons this belief is so common is because it feels true. Think about it. Many people can point to a time in their life when losing weight seemed relatively easy. Skip dessert for a few weeks, cut back on portions, exercise a little more. Problem solved. Fast forward 20 or 30 years, and those same strategies don't seem to produce the same results. Naturally, people start looking for an explanation. And the explanation they usually land on is, my metabolism must be broken. It's a reasonable conclusion, just not an accurate one. Let me tell you about the client who taught me that the hard way. This was one of my very first coaching clients back when I just finished my first nutrition certification. I don't even remember her name anymore, so let's call her Mrs. Smith. She'd been doing Weight Watchers along with her husband, and for the first few months, the scale cooperated. Then it stalled completely. She still had weight to lose, and nothing was working. So I did what my training told me to do. I asked her to weigh, measure, and track every bite of food for a week using an app. The following week, on our check-in call, I pulled up her food log, and I was certain something was wrong. It showed an average of about 1,100 calories a day. That couldn't be right. So, feeling very much like a brand new coach trying to sound authoritative, I gently admonished poor Mrs. Smith and told her I needed her to be completely honest with me if I was going to help her. She promised to do better. The next week, her food log came back showing an average of about 1,150 calories a day. At that point, I broke out my sternest Coach Kevin voice and told her that if she ate even a breath mint, I wanted it written down. Long story short, Mrs. Smith was overweight and she was drastically under-eating. I remember thinking, how is that even possible? Doesn't that defy the laws of physics? Nothing in my nutrition certification training had prepared me for this. I'd been trained to help people eat less, but Mrs. Smith couldn't eat much less and still be a functioning human being. She was the first client I ever met like this. She was nowhere close to the last. In fact, this exact scenario, someone eating very little and still not losing weight, is now one of the most common avatars we see in our coaching business. The body changes with age. Years of dieting leave a mark. Muscle matters. Lifestyle habits matter. All of those things influence how your body functions. What I'm saying is that broken is probably the wrong word. And that's incredibly good news because broken feels permanent, broken feels helpless, broken sounds like something that can't be fixed. Adapted is a very different story. Adaptive means responsive. Adaptive means changeable. Adaptive means your body has been responding to the environment you've given it. And if that's true, and I believe that it is, then your future may be far more hopeful than you realize. Most people never stop to ask, what exactly is metabolism? How does it work? What influences it? What causes it to change? Instead, they simply assume that if weight loss feels difficult, metabolism must be the culprit. And while metabolism absolutely plays a role, the story is far more interesting than most people realize. The truth is that metabolism is one of the most misunderstood concepts in all of health and fitness. People blame it for everything. Weight gain, weight loss resistance, low energy, stubborn belly fat, you name it. The funny thing is that most people couldn't actually define metabolism if their life depended on it. And that's not a criticism, it's simply evidence of how much confusion exists around this topic. So, before we go any further, let's clear something up. Metabolism is not some mysterious force working behind the scenes to sabotage your weight loss efforts. It's not an organ, it's not a hormone, it's not a switch that suddenly flips off on your 50th birthday. In fact, once you understand what metabolism actually is, much of the mystery disappears. And once the mystery disappears, so does a lot of the fear. Because your metabolism is not the enemy. It's not trying to make you overweight. It's not conspiring against you. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do. The real question is whether you've been giving it the right signals. And that's exactly where we're headed next. Because before we can answer whether your metabolism is broken, we need to understand what metabolism actually is and what it isn't. What is metabolism really? Let's start with a simple question. What exactly is metabolism? Take a moment and think about it. If someone stopped you in the grocery store and asked you to explain metabolism, what would you say? Most people would probably answer something like, it's how fast your body burns calories. That's not entirely wrong, but it's incomplete. A more accurate answer is this. Your metabolism is the sum total of all the energy your body uses to keep you alive. That's it. No mystery, no magic, no secret metabolic gremlins hiding in your pantry at night. Just energy and energy conversion. Right now, as you're reading this page, your body is burning energy. Your heart is beating, your lungs are breathing, your brain is processing information, your cells are performing countless tasks behind the scene. All of that requires energy. Even if you spend the entire day lying on the couch, binge watching your favorite TV show, your body would still burn a significant number of calories simply keeping you alive. That's metabolism. In other words, metabolism isn't something you have, it's something your body does every second of every day. Now, here's where people get confused. When most people talk about metabolism, they're usually talking about one thing, how many calories they burn. The assumption is that thin people have a fast metabolism and overweight people have a slow metabolism. While there's a small grain of truth to that idea, it misses a much bigger picture. Think of a metabolism like the engine of a vehicle. A motorcycle burns fuel. A pickup truck burns fuel. A commercial dump truck burns fuel. All three have engines. All three require energy, but they don't use the same amount. Why? Because they're different machines with different demands. The human body works similarly. A large body generally requires more energy than a smaller body. A more active body requires more energy than a sedentary body. A stronger body typically requires more energy than a weaker body. The amount of energy your body uses isn't random. It's influenced by many factors. Some you can't control, but many you can. That's why I don't love the phrase, I have a slow metabolism. It's usually not that simple because metabolism isn't a fixed number carved into stone. It's dynamic, responsive, and adaptive. Your metabolism responds to your body size, your activity level, your muscle mass, your nutrition, your habits, your environment. It's constantly adjusting, constantly adapting, constantly responding, which brings us to one of the biggest misunderstandings in all of health and fitness. People often treat metabolism like it's a permanent permanent trait, as if they were born with a number and are stuck with it forever. That's simply not how the body works. Your metabolism today is not necessarily the same metabolism you had 10 years ago, nor is it necessarily the metabolism you'll have 10 years from now, because the body is always changing. It's always adapting, always responding to the signals you send it. That's incredibly important to understand, because once you realize metabolism is dynamic rather than fixed, a new possibility emerges. Maybe the goal isn't to complain about your metabolism. Maybe the goal is to improve the environment it's responding to. Now, before we go any further, I want to make one thing crystal clear. I'm not suggesting metabolism is irrelevant. Far from it. Metabolism matters a lot. But the way most people think about metabolism is backwards. They treat it as the cause of all their problems. In reality, metabolism is often a reflection of the choices, habits, and circumstances that have shaped the body over time. Think about that for a moment. A reflection. Not a curse, not a life sentence, not an act of bad luck. A reflection. And reflections can change. That's why I get excited when somebody tells me their metabolism is broken. Not because I enjoy their frustration, but because I know there's a good chance their metabolism isn't broken at all. It may simply be responding exactly as it was designed to respond. The real question is, what has it been responding to? Because once we answer that question, things start making a lot more sense. Because if metabolism isn't broken, why does it feel broken? Why does weight loss seem harder? Why does energy feel lower? Why does everything seem to work differently than it used to? Those are fair questions. And the answers begin with a concept we've already touched on several times throughout this book: adaptation. Why it feels broken. At this point, you may be thinking, okay, Coach Kevin, I hear what you're saying. Maybe my metabolism isn't technically broken, but it sure feels broken. Fair enough. Honestly, if I were sitting in your shoes, I might feel the same way. After all, the evidence seems pretty convincing. You're eating less, you're exercising more, you're trying harder, and yet the scale barely moves. Or maybe it moves for a while and then it completely stalls. Meanwhile, you have friends who seem to eat whatever they want without gaining a pound. You have coworkers who skip workouts for weeks and somehow stay lean. You have that one annoying relative who claims they forgot to eat. And there you are, carefully measuring salad dressing and wondering if smelling a cinnamon roll counts as a cheat meal. I get it. It feels unfair. It feels frustrating. And it certainly feels like your metabolism is working against you. But here's what I want you to understand. Just because something feels broken doesn't mean it is. Here's another way to picture it. Imagine you spent years driving a car without performing basic maintenance. No oil changes, no tire rotations, no tune-ups, no attention to warning lights. Eventually, the car starts performing poorly. Fuel efficiency drops, performance declines. Things don't run as smoothly as they once did. At that point, it's easy to say, this car is broken. But that's not the whole story. The car is responding to years of accumulated neglect. The human body works similarly. Most people don't wake up one morning with a metabolism that suddenly stops working. Instead, small changes accumulate over time. Years of dieting, muscle loss, reduced activity, years of stress, years of poor sleep, years of chasing quick fixes instead of sustainable habits. Collectively, they can dramatically influence how the body functions. And that's why so many people become confused, because they compare their current reality to a version of themselves that no longer exists. They remember being 35 or 40 or even 45. They remember when skipping dessert for 2 weeks seemed to solve the problem. What they often forget is that everything else was different too. They had more muscle. They moved more. They recovered differently. They hadn't spent decades cycling through restrictive diets. The environment was different. And because the environment was different, the body's response was different. This is one reason I dislike the phrase, my metabolism is broken, because it suggests something suddenly broke. In reality, most of what people experience is the result of gradual adaptation over many years. Think back to chapter 2, the rabbit food trap. Imagine spending years repeatedly telling your body, food is scarce, eat less, diet harder, cut more calories, skip more meals, do more cardio. Now imagine repeating that pattern over and over again for 20 years. Wouldn't it make sense for the body to eventually adapt? Wouldn't it make sense for the body to become more efficient? Wouldn't it make sense for the body to respond differently than it did when you were younger? Of course it would. That doesn't mean it's broken. It means it's listening. Remember the phrase from the last chapter, your body is always adapting. The question is, adapting to what? That's one of the reasons I find the word broken so misleading. Broken implies damage. Adaptation implies response. And responses can be influenced. That's a very hopeful distinction. Now let's talk about something else that makes metabolism feel broken. The scale. The scale has probably caused more confusion than almost any other object in modern health and fitness. People step on it every morning and allow that little number to determine their mood for the day. If it's down, they feel successful. If it's up, they feel defeated. The problem is the scale doesn't tell you the whole story. It doesn't tell you whether you're stronger, whether you're healthier, whether you're carrying more muscle, whether you're sleeping better, whether you're improving your long-term health. It simply reports a number. And when people become obsessed with that number, they often miss what's actually happening beneath the surface. That's why so many people conclude their metabolism is broken. They're measuring the wrong things. They're focusing on short-term outcomes. They're expecting the body to respond instantly, and they're overlooking the fact that meaningful change often occurs long before it becomes visible. I've seen people become dramatically healthier before the scale moved much at all. I've seen energy improve and strength improve, blood pressure improve, blood sugar improve, confidence improve, clothes fit differently, life improves. Yet, because the scale didn't move quickly enough, they assumed nothing was happening. The truth is exactly the opposite. A lot was happening. They simply weren't measuring the right things. That's why I want you to stop asking, is my metabolism broken? And start asking, what has my metabolism been responding to? Because that question leads us somewhere productive. That question leads us towards understanding, and understanding leads us towards solutions. Because once you stop viewing your metabolism as broken, you can begin seeing it for what it really is, a highly intelligent system responding to the environment you've created. And that's where things start getting exciting, because if adaptation created the problem, adaptation can help create the solution. Adaptation, not damage. The human body is remarkably intelligent. In fact, it's doing something far more sophisticated than most people realize. It's constantly adapting to help you survive. Not thrive, not look good at the beach, not fit into your favorite jeans, survive. That's its primary mission. And from a survival standpoint, adaptation is a superpower. Think about it. If you move to a hot climate, your body adapts. If you move to a cold climate, your body adapts. If you start walking every day, your body adapts. If you start lifting weights, your body adapts. If you spend years sitting in a chair for 10 hours a day, your body adapts. Your body is always responding to the demands placed upon it. Now, let's apply that same principle to dieting. Imagine you repeatedly send your body the same message for 20 years. Food is scarce, food is scarce, food is scarce. Every few months, another diet, another calorie cutting plan, another round of restriction, another attempt to survive on as little food as possible. What do you think your body's going to do? Exactly what it was designed to do. Adapt. Not because it's trying to sabotage you, because it's trying to protect you. Think of running a household budget. If money suddenly becomes tight, you don't immediately panic. You adjust. Maybe you cut discretionary spending, delay a few purchases, become more efficient. The goal is to make available resources last longer. Your body operates in much the same way. When energy becomes consistently scarce, your body begins looking for ways to become more efficient. Again, that's not damage, that's adaptation, and that's an incredibly important distinction because adaptation can be changed. Let's say you spent years becoming physically inactive. What happens when you begin walking consistently? Your body adapts. What happens when you start strength training? Your body adapts. What happens when you improve your nutrition? Your body adapts. Notice the pattern? The same adaptability that can move you in the wrong direction can also move you in the right direction. Now, does that mean change happens overnight? Of course not. That's another trap people fall into. They spend 20 years creating a problem and expect it to disappear in 20 days. The body does not work that way. Remember, adaptation is gradual. Muscle loss is gradual. Weight gain is gradual. Reduced fitness is gradual. The good news, improvement is gradual too. Strength is built gradually. Health is rebuilt gradually. Energy improves gradually. A better metabolism is built gradually. That's why patience matters. Not because patience is a virtue, because biology takes time. The body responds remarkably well when given the right signals, but it responds on biological timelines, not emotional timelines. In other words, the body doesn't care that you want 6 months of results by next Tuesday. It's going to adapt at the speed adaptation occurs. And honestly, that's okay, because our goal isn't a quick fix. Our goal is a permanent solution. That's why I want you to stop asking, how can I force my body to lose weight? And start asking, how can I create an environment that encourages my body to thrive? Those are very different questions. One treats the body like an enemy. The other treats the body like a partner. And trust me, you'll get much further working with your body than fighting against it, because your metabolism is not damaged. It's responding. It's adapting. It's listening. The question is no longer whether your body can change. The question is, what signals are you sending it? Because once you understand that, a lot of the myths surrounding metabolism begin to fall apart. The good news. By now, we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about dieting, restriction, aging, muscle loss, metabolism, and if you're anything like most readers, you're probably beginning to see your body a little differently than you did when you started this book. Good. That's exactly the point, because for years, many people have been trapped in a story that goes something like this. I'm getting older. My metabolism is slowing down. My body is working against me. Nothing works anymore. I guess this is just how it's going to be. That's a discouraging story, and unfortunately, it's a story millions of people believe. The problem isn't just that it's discouraging. The problem is that it encourages people to stop trying. Why bother? Why invest in your health? Why build strength? Why improve your nutrition? Why change anything if the outcome is already predetermined? Thankfully, that's not how the human body works, and that's good news. The good news is that your body is still adaptable. The good news is that your body is still responsive. The good news is that your body is still listening at 50, at 60, at 70, and beyond. The body does not stop responding simply because another birthday arrives. In fact, some of the most impressive transformations I've witnessed have happened later in life. Not because those people discovered some secret, not because they had extraordinary genetics, not because they found the perfect supplement, because they finally started sending their bodies different signals. That's it. They stopped treating their body like the enemy. They stopped trying to starve it into submission. They stopped looking for shortcuts and they started focusing on fundamentals. Strength training, movement, nutrition, recovery, consistency, the boring stuff. The stuff nobody wants to put on the cover of magazines because it doesn't sound exciting. In other words, the stuff that works. Now, let's be realistic. This isn't a fairy tale. You aren't going to wake up tomorrow with a metabolism you had at 25. And honestly, that's okay, because that's not the goal. The goal is not to become 25 again. The goal is to become the healthiest, strongest, most capable version of yourself right now. The version of yourself that still exists. The version of yourself that is waiting for better instructions. That's a much more exciting goal because it's achievable. It's practical, and it's entirely within your control. You can't control your age. You can't control your genetics. You can't control every challenge life throws your way, but you can control the environment you create. You can control the habits you build. You can control how often you move, how you nourish your body, how you recover, how you invest in your future. And over time, those decisions compound. Just like money invested wisely compounds, just like neglect compounds, just like muscle loss compounds, positive habits compound too. That's one of the most helpful truths in all of health and fitness. Small improvements, repeated consistently, create extraordinary outcomes. Not overnight, not next week, not by next Tuesday, but over months and years. And that's exactly how healthy aging happens. Not through dramatic transformations, not through miracle solutions, through small decisions repeated long enough to become part of who you are. That's why I don't want you leaving this chapter thinking about metabolism. I want you leaving this chapter thinking about possibility. Because your metabolism is not the most important part of your future. Your daily habits are. Your metabolism will respond to those habits. Your body will respond to those habits. Your future will respond to those habits. And that's incredibly empowering because it means you are not waiting for your metabolism to cooperate. You're creating the conditions that allow it to cooperate. That's a very different mindset, and it's one that changes everything. In many ways, that's the central lesson of this chapter. Your metabolism is not the enemy. It's your body's response system. Treat it well, give it the right signals, and it will do exactly what it was designed to do. Adapt, respond, improve, and support the life you want to live. Now, here's where things get really interesting, because if your metabolism responds to the environment you create, then we need to take a hard look at one of the most common pieces of advice in modern health and fitness. Advice that sounds logical, advice that millions of people have followed, advice that may actually be keeping people stuck. You've heard it your entire life. Eat less and move more. Let's talk about why that stops working. Okay, folks, there you go. That's chapter 4. And I hope you're walking away from this one with a different way of thinking about your metabolism and maybe even with a little more hope about what's possible for you. Because if there's one idea I want you to remember from this chapter, it's this. Your metabolism is not broken. Your body isn't broken. Your body's adapting. It's responding to the signals you're giving it. And that distinction matters. Remember, adaptive means we can change the signals. We have that power. We can build muscle. We can move more. We can nourish our bodies better. We can prioritize recovery. We can stop trying to starve ourselves into submission and start creating an environment that allows our bodies to thrive. And yes, that process takes time. But remember, we're not trying to get our 25-year-old bodies back. We're trying to build the strongest, healthiest, most capable version of ourselves right now and carry that body with us into an extraordinary second half of life. And that's really what Fully Alive is all about. Now, as always, I want to remind you that you are hearing this book before it's finished. So you're part of the process. This is a rough draft at this point, and I genuinely want to know what you guys thought about this chapter. Did the idea of adaptation instead of damage change the way you think about metabolism? Was there something in here that clicked with you? There's something in here that you disagree with? Was there something in this chapter that confused you? Was there something that I should try and explain better? I would love for you guys to give me your feedback. Just shoot me an email at coach@silveredgefitness.com. That's coach@silveredgefitness.com. I personally read every single one of those emails, and I've already received some incredible feedback from those of you that are following along with this series. Again, your thoughts, your questions, and even your own stories will help shape the final version of this book. And one last favor here, guys. If you know someone who's convinced that their metabolism is broken, or someone who's been dieting for years, or someone who's eating less and less and trying harder and harder and wondering why their body just won't cooperate, do me a favor, send them this episode, because maybe what they need isn't another diet. Maybe they just need to understand their body hasn't betrayed them. It's been listening all along. And in the next chapter, we're going after another piece of advice you probably heard your entire life, and that is the famous eat less and move more advice. It sounds perfectly logical. There's just one problem. For millions of people over 50, it stops working. And we're going to talk about why. So I'll see you next week for chapter 5 of Fully Live. Until then, folks, keep building and stay strong.